Hello, world. Welcome back to another episode of Practicing Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. My name's Sarah, and I'm here with my friend Lizelle. And today we're going to be talking about episode 35, which is called The Symbol, Sacredness, and the Sacred. And so, as I usually do, I'm going to pass it over to Lizelle to get us started with a quote.
Hello, world. Yes, I'm reading from Plato, Republic, Book 7 still. I'm just going to read without interpretation. Figure it out on the basis of what was said before, Socrates said. For if the one is adequately seen, itself by itself, or is grasped by some other sense, it would not draw men towards being, as we were saying about the finger. But if some opposition to it is always seen at the same time, so that nothing looks as though it were one more than the opposite of one, then there would now be need of something to judge. And in this case, a soul would be compelled to be at a loss and to make investigation, searching, setting in motion the intelligence within it, and to ask what the one itself is. And thus the study of the one would be among those apt to lead and turn around toward the contemplation of what is. Thus far, our scripture reading.
Well, that one you had to have picked, right? That wasn't just one of the highlighted sections or something you happened upon.
Well, actually,
Wow. Okay.
I have a few highlighted sections in book 7, and I read through all of them and chose this one.
Okay.
So
All right.
both. It's a combination.
I see. The most fitting of the highlighted sections.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very appropriate, right? Well, getting us into this episode, he, of course, does this recap. And I think two of the main things from the recap that stand out that I just want to presence is that sacredness homes us against horror, and sacredness puts us in touch with the numinous. So those are previous lessons we've learned. And now we're moving into.
And boy, have we learned them.
Beat over the head with them. Yeah. Yeah. Right. And then we moved into this talk about symbols. And it's so funny because today's March 2nd. We had this leap year this year, and the Symbolic World conference was held on Leap Day on the 29th of February. So he's bringing in Jonathan Pageau just as Jonathan Pageau is like having a conference. So that was interesting to me. The thing about symbols is that they are like metaphor. There's something participatory about symbols, that signs are just kind of a literal sign. Like there's no other way to, like, you just see it. That's a sign. And then it tells you to do something, like go that way or stop, or, that's how signs work. Pause. That's how signs work. Where symbols, you're in relationship with them, and it's something very metaphorical. And he's going to get into exaptation again, and we'll talk about the opposite of exaptation. So where are you at the beginning here? What did you want to start?
Well, the word serious play jumped out at me from these serious play by engaging in symbolic behavior jumped out at me very strongly. And now as you were speaking, like my heart actually started gave like an extra heartbeat at a certain point when you mentioned Jonathan Pageau. Did I ever tell you about my interaction with Jonathan Pageau?
I'd like you to have it on recording.
Okay, so I had the great good fortune of meeting the man in person. Before that, I wasn't very impressed with him. He actually scared me a bit because I love Jordan Peterson, and I'm afraid of going down the path of Christianity. And I saw Jordan Peterson being very much influenced by Jonathan Pageau towards that direction. So I actually had a negative stance towards Jonathan Pageau when I met him. But And even now, I have difficulty, reasons why I have difficulty watching Jonathan again. But the man in person is phenomenal, mostly because he really carries symbolic weight. Like, he really does. So we, in Thunder Bay, the Friday, there was paintball event. It was raining. Was mostly men. There were, despite what what's his name, Paul Van der Clay said in one recording, there were some women, me being one of them, but I did not play. I helped with preparation of the food, and then I ate with them. And by the I was standing, like, to the side, and as the men came back from war, and like seeing to it that everybody know where the plates are and where everything is that they need, so that and everyone got their food and found their places and sat down and to the meal, to the lunch on Friday. And then when everyone had a place, I got my food, and there was only one place left, and that was next to Jonathan Peugeot. So I asked the man opposite of me if he'd mind if I could sit there, and not Jonathan. I don't know why, and and so I did sit down, and that lunch was so symbolically rich. It was a table full of young men. I did count; it wasn't quite 12, but it was like 13 or 14, leaning in to ask Jonathan questions about the Bible and scripture interpretation, and religion, religio, those types of things. And I was sitting next to him, and I had such a Mary Magdalene moment. Like, no, not a moment. The whole lunch was like, I felt like Mary Magdalene. Across from me, I'm sorry, I'm doing this very long, but
That's good. I love
it's
it.
very. Across from me, there was a guy. I can't remember his real name, but maybe it's better that I don't say it. But he still had his, but he did nothing wrong. It was just symbolically very rich to me. He still had his war gear on, because I played paintball, and he had his gun on the table, and I was like, "Oh, hello, Simon," that's like that, like so. The men, the young men, because it was young men around the table, were also very symbolically rich. They all just also got their characters, and so yeah. And it was just amazing how the practice, because I know Jonathan Peugeot does various practices trying to internalize Jesus. And his presence is a proof that it works. It was so strong. And there was a certain point, he very graciously said, "I'm just going to go get a drink." And he got up and left. And I felt such a hole in me. Like, it was so empty without his presence. Um, it was quite, noticeable. And then when he came back, it was just, everything was good again. And when the meal was over and we all got up and we all went away, that was over. Like, I do not crave Jonathan Peugeot now at all. It's not like the moment the meal was over, that spell was broken, and it was like, okay, I can live my life without you, because you are not really what it's about.
Yeah.
But around that table, he presenced Christ so well, so symbolically
Mm-hmm.
well.
Well, good. I'm glad that we have that story now. Okay. Well, symbols. He's talking about metaphor, a profound, pervasive, highly functional, I guess, way of interacting. Or yeah, there's something here about meta assimilation and meta accommodation too that I don't know if you can go further into for me.
Not really.
He doesn't say much about it.
He comes back to it in the end, where symbol affords both of these, meta
Mm-hmm.
assimilation and meta accommodation. And when we go to those little boxes, so that little boxes is like you're caught in your little worldview,
Mm-hmm.
and in order to transcend that, to break frame,
Mm-hmm.
you need something from outside the worldview to reach in. And then you have to transform to accommodate it. So there's some accommodation taking shape. And then the box expand, and you, as you assimilate yourself to this new
Mm-hmm.
way of seeing, this new way of being.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, he mentions it here, and then only later he uses the words again, but not explicitly like connecting it like this. But that's in my mind how this connects then.
Yeah, I like that. Well, because he says that symbols are participatory. Um, and he kind of like making a distinction, and I didn't write down the names of the people that he's making an argument against, but this idea of it just being a projection we project onto our world, it's actually exaptation. So he's saying our ability to play with exaptation, this
Mhm.
relationship that we have with that which is not us.
So he spoke about this in the previous episode as well. I remember
Okay.
because I had the book of these people that he refers to.
Okay.
And oh, it's just so cute how he speaks of the article by Faveki and
I
Simon. I'm
know.
not sure. And you can
Kennedy.
see
It's
Kennedy. You can
Kennedy and
see
Vivek.
totally that as if he's completely disassociated with that. Like,
Who are these people? I know. Speaking about it in third person was adorable.
I think there's also something of the humility in that actually. Um, that that has happened, and it's
Mhm.
something I need to quote because it's good scholarship. But the fact that it's me is irrelevant.
Yeah.
So last time I talked about it's this new Platonic worldview that John has, that it's here. It's not just we projecting up. So it's not just emanation, but it's also emergence. It's
Mm.
also calling us into. That's kind of um, I think that's his argument against them.
There's a relationship instead of it's
Yeah,
just a projection
yeah, yeah,
outward.
yeah.
Because that was something we were getting into with all those people that killed the universe and killed God. And just like, it's all dead. It's all dead outside of us. Wow. That's really rich for like what we're planning to do now too. It's just like once you break the frame, you've got to make accommodations and you have to assimilate into the new. You can't just continue to do things the way that you've always done them because
No,
it no longer fits. It no longer makes sense. And if you push, you're working against the spiral up.
yeah.
You're kind of like that that pull to the old is too strong to allow yourself into the new.
Mm, mm. I was thinking this morning, the words, I'm exhausted from living in two worlds and two worldviews.
Yeah.
I think that's what's exhausting me. It's so easy to say, you know what? I'm going back to the old worldview because I wasn't exhausted back then.
Yeah. For me, it feels like I'm more than happy to cut the tether to the old world and blast off because I'm just so sick of being held down and held back. And I just wanted to cut I just wanted to cut things, get rid of it.
Mm, mm.
And so I don't know, like, yeah, I'm tired of living in two worlds. That's a good way to put
Yeah.
it.
There is, of course, the new Platonic image is also of being able to live in two worlds. That's why a frog is the symbol, because it can live in water and in air. And maybe that's just what we're going through. We're going from tadpoles to frogs.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking
But
too.
I mean, there's nothing more awkward than the tadpole halfway to frog, is there? That's the ugliest thing ever.
Little legs with the tail. There's a lot. I mean, we're symbolically going through things as we speak right now, too. It's really interesting. There's no way to help it. There's just a lot of
Mm,
symbols that are jumping
mm,
out. Well, of course, I love this part where we're talking about, okay, he says, holding in mind, it's the activating process. It allows me to deeply participate with something. So he gives the example of a scale as a symbol and engaging yourself with balance. And this is so Libra. It's not even funny. It's funny you were talking about a Libra earlier. Um, but Libra, justice, balance, the scales, this is all. And he even mentions Athena, who is wisdom and war and all of these themes of that's in astrology that would be like the archetype of the diplomat in war, balance in war. And so all of that is ways that I engage with the scales because they mean a little bit more to me than or different to me than just a scale. So there's a lot symbolically that I'm in a relationship with. The scales allow us to engage with balancing. And this is an example of exaptation, just like we were talking about with the way back when, the shaman, exaptation. Even the tongue, that was another thing we talked about, exaptation. And these are all symbols that I'm giving. Triangle. All of these symbols pop up and they mean so much more than just what we're saying. And so we were like, it almost takes me back to the mind's eye of where I was in that moment when I learned that thing. And yeah, I don't know, like that's a whole other way of relating with it. But the exaptation of
But that's exactly it. It's beautifully illustrated. That's a whole other way of relating to it. That's exactly what a symbol is.
mm-hmm, multiple ways. Because what did he call him?
Mm.
SA. What does SA stand for? Subsidiary awareness.
Oh, yeah.
The subsidiary awarenesses of these symbols, that's where you get the ability to exapt. Maybe I'm making claims here that were not made in the episode, but we use it to find complex contingency relationships between any areas of the brain. Exaptation.
Mm. Well, that's the cerebellum specifically that he's talking to about there, that we use as to make to make the um, how the cerebellum was exapted is what he's talking about there.
It says, or he says, the cerebellum improves, it smooths out, it picks up, it defines the patterns of contingency and dependency between two parts of the brain that were probably already relating, but then the cerebellum throws some magic on it and says, here's some extra things that you could attribute to these parts, whatever.
No wonder you're so good with seeing patterns. It's in your name,
It's in my
cerebellum.
name, exactly. It all makes sense now.
And this, folks, is a really good example of how you're not supposed to see patterns.
So he says that the cerebellum is the machinery. It activates that machinery to practice the skill of being more just when we talk about the scales. That cerebellum is giving, perhaps, I don't know if that's exactly what he's saying, but it's smoothing out the relationship between scales and balance and just. And they're coming together to be not the focal, right? Not the focal awareness, but all these subsidiary awarenesses come into that symbol that is the focal awareness.
Yeah.
Activate, he says, is the opposite of exaptation, which I find very interesting. And I thought maybe we could explore that a little more.
The cerebellum itself is an amazing part of our brain because it has been exapted from just helping us balance to actually balancing parts of the brain. And I think then helping us, balance our emotions and our reason. I'm not sure about that, but I think so. So the cerebellum itself is even also a symbol of how exaptation works, or an illustration if you don't want to go all symbol on that, because that's maybe taken symbol a little bit too far. Yeah. And then he talks about the flag as well.
Now, before I got to the flag, he's talking about Booba and Kiki. I don't know how much you want to go into these two characters, but he says we are much more symbolic in a participatory fashion than we might think. Honestly, I didn't get a good look at those images before he went on to saying what he was saying, because like oftentimes I'm like writing the notes still down and like he just went right into that. So I didn't get a chance to like decide before he revealed the most common answer, which I probably would have done anyway. But
yeah, I did. For me, it was very clear who's Kiki and who's Booba.
so yes, these shapes that are drawn is one is, I mean, I guess it looks bubbly, it looks blobbish. It's so you would like those sounds would come, and then he talked really like about Kiki being sharp, and those letters are also sharp, and so then he's like, but what do you mean by that? And that's very interesting that that is something that we do. We're just like, I don't know, it's just got this feeling or this look to it.
Yeah.
So the Booba and Kiki is not a purpose. He made that
No,
clear. He was like, there's no purpose to this one. It's just fun.
no,
But we can
no.
actually,
But it also illustrates how absolutely wrong we can be, right? Because that's not Kiki and that's not Booba. That's just what our
they are
minds tell
now.
us. I doubt the.
um, but he did say that the scales is like something that has purpose. Like
Yeah, yeah.
recognizing that balance is related to scales and related to justice and
Mm. I mean, maybe if, like, for instance, you're like, you know what, I need some edge to my personality. I'm going to engage with Kiki for a while. Then Kiki becomes meaningful.
truly, yeah.
So symbols become meaningful if we, engage with them and participate with them. That's how symbols become, and that's how they get meaning. So Kiki could be meaningful. Don't disparage Kiki.
Well, that's the next thing that I have written is where he says, but you have to internalize the symbol. And that's exactly what you just said. You have to like be Kiki in order for her to have purpose. Okay, because the whole point of the symbolic world, as Jonathan Pajot, I guess, or I guess as John would describe Jonathan Pajot, is you have to savor it. And I think that's the sacred, savoring the sacred, or even the sacredness. I don't know really what, but the symbolic world and symbols that Jonathan Pajot, as you've described him, embodies are exemplifying the savoring of the sacredness and the sacred, I think.
Oh, well, I suppose that's also sacredness. Um, but becoming more virtuous and then interacting with justice, for instance, through a scale, through the symbol of the scale. So cultivating character,
Mm.
interacting, participating, savoring symbols is also a way of cultivating character.
Yeah, something was coming up about it all being relational. It's religio. Like that's what it is. You are what you are in constant relationship with, whatever that is. So the symbols have the capacity to put us into relationship with something. That's just what we just basically just said. They have the capacity to do it. And if we are in a relationship with something, then we're in a relationship with all of those subsidiary awarenesses of that symbol, which opens us up to insight. Yeah, the symbol is transforming me, and that's activating the machinery of, well, in this case, balance, because he's talking about justice. And then that justice is reconfiguring the machinery of me. So that symbol puts you into the spiral, and he'll get to that later too, or that puts you into the motion, puts you into motion. The symbol puts you into motion.
It draws you into anagoge, and I'm not sure that's
Mm.
too early to mention that,
Mm.
but that is what's happening here. That reciprocal opening, that's what's happening here. That box getting bigger and you accommodating and assimilating to the bigger worldview, bigger box.
Yeah.
That's what's happening here.
Yeah. So let's go with another example, which is meditation, because that and breathing. So he's saying following your breath helps you to scale down to your attention, and then you become sensitized by scaling down to how much is in process in the brain. So then that my mind is a fine grained process. There's paining, as he says. There's not pain, but there's paining. It's like an active process that's happening. A lot is unfolding, and it's something I participate in. And so he says the breath starts to become a participatory symbol through meditation of the impermanence of things and how interconnected and flowing. And he says maybe I'm much more impermanent and interconnected. So like there's a way that you relate with your breath that expands out to, oh, that's me. I don't know. Like, do you have better words to say that?
Mm-mm. I just want to point out that it's not really about his realization here, although I think he's putting it in there for good reason. Like he doesn't do things without reason. But it's the illustration of how symbol works. That's what the idea is
Mm.
about. So if you just want to stick to the core of this series, everything he says about breath and impermanence is irrelevant. But of course, it's not irrelevant to the bigger picture and of John's work in total, because so that's all I want to just point at.
Yeah, the next part that I left off is I might also scale up all of reality, including me, is impermanent and interconnected. So there's something in that meaning making machinery that is like, oh, I extrapolate further from this recognition of my brain being always in participation or in an unfolding, and that breath starts to become a participatory symbol of impermanence of things. So then I exact that lesson onto I might also scale up all of reality, including me, is impermanent and interconnected, just in that symbol of my breath.
The word that is in my mind is explode, but I'm not sure that it's the right. But this is like very a good illustration of how the symbol can just open up fields of perception. You see the breath, but behind or through the breath, you see the process of your own being and your own impermanence.
Mm.
And through the breath and your own impermanence, you see the impermanence of the all.
Yeah.
Everything. So that's how a metaphor can just open up. Open up is a better word than explode. Just open up your field of vision, your field of perception, your box.
Yeah. All right, now we're getting into the flag, and he omits the Canadian flag. A patriot looking at the flag, that there's a lot of symbolism in leaving the monarchs, leaving the religious persecution, and like, no, we're not going to have anything with that. And then this is freedom, and then we just we're the military of the entire world. But all that aside, um, yeah. So that's the whole thing. Like I have so many different subsidiary awarenesses of the American flag, Star Spangled Banner, but yours would be different. Like
I
I
have
could
no
add,
relation to the American flag
yeah,
because I'm not American.
right. Isn't that interesting? We can be so deeply related to something that somebody else is like is red, white, and blue. There's a lot of those.
For some reason, when I think of the American flag, I think of the 4th of July.
Yeah,
But that
Independence
makes sense,
Independence
right?
Day. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, well, thank you. I'm just kidding.
So I do have some association with it, yes.
Yeah, but it is a lot different.
Um,
Like I'm like, well, there's 50 stars, there's 13 stripes. Like this all is very, and
yeah,
those
I don't
colors are
know.
very symbolic. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. That's really
yeah.
interesting. So all these subsidiary awarenesses that I have of my flag, it turns into this focal awareness of focusing attention. And he's like, sometimes we play with this. So there's the focused attention that we can have, but then sometimes we play with this by looking at a flag. I'm integrating all of these aspects of myself together and becoming patriotic. You just watched it happen in real time, participating in patriotism.
Okay, I'm gonna read what I wrote here, although it might be jumping a bit. And I wrote in brackets, I think, because I didn't get all his words. So,
Yes.
though I'm focusing my attention on the object or symbol, what I'm actually interested in is the beyond of the symbol, is what is beyond the symbol. Through it, I activate myself, integrate myself, becoming someone else. The symbol can also disclose reality to me.
Yeah, I like that though. You presenced that whole idea of looking through to see.
You look at the flag, but you see so much. You see history, you see your own relationship with your country, you see so much. You don't really see the flag. The flag is just what your subsidiary awareness is pointing at.
Yeah, I'm looking through the flag and seeing so many different things from it. Like I
Mm.
said, I mean, I even just gave you like standard facts that we know here.
We had a mini Introduction to American history lesson,
Yes.
just because we thought of the flag.
Exactly. Yeah. As I see more deeply into the object, it draws me in, and that affords much more powerful integration, which in turn actually coordinates my cognition much more so I can see more deeply into reality if I engage with it symbolically.
That's a beautiful sentence. I can see more deeply into reality if I engage with it symbolically. See, I think my big need for pause at the moment is the question, but am I really engaging with reality when I participate with symbols?
There's a fly in my ear. Is this really, yeah, is it reality or am I bullshitting myself? That's what we
Yeah,
always have to go to. And when
yeah.
you've like, we have gotten an onslaught now of symbols. They're just, and then once that starts to be the thing, then you got to wonder, get the fuck away from me. You got to
Exactly.
wonder.
Symbols, get the fuck away from me. It's enough.
Yeah, it's just overwhelming. It's the combinatorial explosion. You feel crazy, and that's overwhelming and difficult to exist in a realistic way, in a pragmatic way. It's very difficult to exist in a pragmatic way when symbols are flying at you.
But the symbols that for my feeling, the feeling that I'm getting is when I participate with a symbol, it's like when I do dream analysis on myself. Um, I have this intention, okay, I'm going to write my dreams down when I wake up so that I can actually do some dream analysis. And then I keep fucking waking up during the whole night. I dream and I wake up, dream, wake up, because the unconscious is just so happy, like, yay, she's paying attention to me.
Yeah.
And it feels like there's something behind the symbols that's like now so excited that they're being looked at,
Mm-hmm.
that they're just too much. It's like, dude, I need to sleep.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the feeling that I have. So it's not that I see a lot,
Yeah.
but the symbols that I engage with is becoming so deep that I need to grow some fins before I can follow it further.
Yeah. Yeah. We talked about the nitrox. I think that's what they call it. When you dive deeper, and you got to adjust your air because you're not going to get down as far as long. Like you can't stay down as long without the nitrix uh, enriched air. I think that's what they call it. He brought callback to another analogy, which was the mother-in-law seeing her daughter-in-law differently, and then in doing so sees herself differently. And then there's transframing.
It's from this book of Murdoch, The Sovereignty of Good, where he references again.
And he says symbols have the capacity to do this, that same kind of thing of transframing, and similar with music. But it's always that he's like, well, maybe not always, but he's describing symbols as putting us into contact with the mysterious, as I wrote it.
That's exactly what I wrote as well.
It activates you. And I still want to explore that activation versus exaptation. So this is probably a good place to do that. So they are opposite from one another. Well, we know that exaptation is utilizing something for that had a purpose and using it for something different, right? I don't
So
think
it's acceptation against, what's the other word?
activation.
Activation.
And activation is what the cerebellum puts us into, or,
So the way I see it is, I'm going to go back to that Neoplatonic thing of emergence and emanation. Like exaptation is, it emerges from, the function is the tongue. The function is to move around food. But then speech grows, the ability to speak is exapted because now the tongue can move around and make the airway flow through a way that we can actually speak now. But then, and now I'm maybe going to become a bit too woohoo, but as an illustration of a possible way of activation. So the logos is a principle in the cosmos. But the logos, which can translate it in so many different ways, principle being one, reason being one, word being one, wants to be spoken. So it draws from this the ability to form words. So it's not just from below, it's from above as well, that it's being pulled up
Yeah.
at the same time as that it's growing.
Yeah. And activation, because it does, like, that's what he's saying. Like, if you think about activation like a catalyst.
So there's something that calls. There's, see, that's the weird thing. That's why when John said, like, yeah, I don't think there's something like sacred or something like that, like the sacred, like, because this whole build-up feels to me like there's something that calls you. There's something actually behind the symbol that wants to be seen. I mean, that's the way we are speaking.
Yeah.
That wants to be seen, and that is that pulling part.
Yeah. I think that's because we still believe that there's such a thing as relevance. And I think he's really emphasizing that relevance realization is what exists and not relevance.
And then sacredness exists, but not the sacred. But then he says, like, there's something beyond the symbol that pulls us. Like, I'm 100% sure he has it together in his mind.
I know.
It's just really difficult to interpret.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, if we put this in evolutionary terms, because I do believe in evolution, um, if we put this in evolutionary terms, like the genes just want to move into the future. Now, why do the genes want? And we also, like, when we're speaking in biology terms, we're like, I get that, like, this is personifying the genes. They don't actually want anything, but to but nothing. Genes move into the future. They are a package of information that is moving into the future and constantly changing, becoming something different, reorganized. Well, not really. Yeah, I mean, they do, because mitosis and things, meiosis, but the 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 rearrangement happens because it's necessary. Something is realized to be necessary for survival. So, and it's like, how does that happen? How does the realization happen? That's the very interesting thing to me. That's what we're saying is like, okay, but there has to be something calling our attention to that relevance realization. And there, it's all those pre's, it's pre-categorical, pre-conceptual, pre all the things. So then what's before? Yeah. But I think that that is like where I'm still associating relevance with having it's a noun to me as opposed to the relevance realization, which is a participatory thing.
I was thinking yesterday, my life would be so much easier if I could interact with sacredness without actually needing the sacred.
I think we do. I think we do in the coven. It's interacting with sacredness without there being a necessary sacred. Although we do still feel like we're interacting with something altogether, there is just some sort of magic that's happening in our participation with one another in that mystery. There's more, okay, because he's not going to just like draw the line here and say there's no such thing as sacred. So we'll get more to that because I think it's something that we're gonna frame in a little bit. So put a pin in that. Okay, the symbol activates you, he's saying. Maybe it's the symbol that's the sacred, who knows? It activates you, it draws you beyond yourself, and it reaches into your worldview. So it reaches into your worldview, but you want to be in another worldview. The insight is not stable in the original framing, which is what that symbol is reaching into, I guess, is the original framing that you once had. And it draws you beyond yourself so that your framing actually, he's showing it as expanding.
So I'm thinking, I don't have one yet, but I mean, you can make this very simple. If you do the whole child is to an adult, like the adult is to the sage.
Mm-hmm.
There's some things in a child's worldview that when they notice something, see let's take smoking, because that's in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So the child sees his parents smoking, and that's a sign of adult freedom. But the child needs, to grow a bit more to incorporate that in their life. And maybe in that awkward phase of teenagerdom where kids smoke just so that they can think they're adults, but they're not. Maybe that's where I'm in now, and that's why it's so awkward. So it's on a big scale, like, yes, we can use this to hope. No, I'm not saying that I have a capability of becoming a sage, but the idea is that it should be for human beings possible to use this whole mechanism to move from adult to sage. But
Mm-hmm.
it's easier seen maybe in the moving from child to adult.
Like that's kind of the practice round in this lifetime
Mm,
is attuning yourself to a frame to which you actually aspire
yeah.
and recognizing how you find relevance in what to aspire to towards. Sorry, realizing, recognizing.
It's also, yeah, recognition is also important in new Platonism.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm transformed.
You go,
Um,
girl.
I'm transformed to fit an expanding world, and they are integrative in the anagogic sense. Symbols are integrative in the anagogic sense. They are integrating you together, the new world together, and in an integrative fashion between you and the new world. Yeah, and then he of course talks about the cross, the vertical and the horizontal. If we are receptive, he says interesting that some people are receptive and some people aren't, then that interaction affects us, integrated in attention to the cross. I mean, it was what we were talking about with the flag. It's
Mhm.
interesting that that's something that's very meaningful to me and it has sideline meaning to you. It's not here, but you
Mhm.
feel it.
But I think it's also deeper than that. I think also some people are more receptive to being symbolic than others. I think that's more what he means here, because it makes absolute sense. Anyone could understand why the American flag means not that much to me and means a lot to you. But the fact that one person sees a cross, even though okay, two people grow up in a Christian country. One person sees the cross and it doesn't move that person at all. The other person sees the cross and she is deeply moved.
Mm-hmm.
They were raised the same, basically, same country, same symbol. Why is there a difference in their response to the symbol? To
Mm.
symbolism as such.
Yeah.
That's the question. Like, some people are receptive to symbols and others aren't so much.
Mm. So that would like call into question for me whether or not like life is experimenting with whether or not it's evolutionarily advantageous to find symbolic meaning in certain objects. Yeah. Or whether or not it's not. Let's try it out.
And apparently it's both, and beneficial and not, because two strands of us evolved.
Yep.
But that being said, that brings me back to one of the first books that we read in this series,
Mm.
um, about how Homo sapiens, that's what's different between us and Neanderthal. We have a very deep, rich, symbolic understanding of the world. We
Mm.
buried our dead not so that they wouldn't stink up the place, but because we thought we buried them with stuff so that they can have it in the hereafter. We have this sense of the other world,
Yeah.
which seemed to have lacked in the Neanderthals. So, strictly speaking, human DNA that survived
Yep.
should have something that makes us receptive to the symbol in it. Because way back when we still had competitors, but that were similar to us, that's what made us win.
Relevance realization, maybe.
Relevance realization being directed to itself. That is maybe it.
Oh, right.
Like,
Yep.
that
Yep.
self directing part, that is maybe indeed
Yeah.
what is the crucial thing in.
Because what's defining self for Neanderthals, maybe, just um, speculating here, is just survival of
Yeah.
myself. Let me get this going, move. Okay, but this is very impermanent,
Yeah.
especially this one. But me as in a group, as a collective, like transcending the self or burying each other, because, well, it means a lot, like having those ideas, believing that puts you into a different self relationship. Now my self means a lot more than it meant just me need to eat, me
Mm.
fight bear.
No,
I'm
no,
just
no fight
sorry,
bear.
Neanderthal. I'm not insulting Neanderthals. I have a very high percentage compared to my family of Neanderthal DNA, so I just want to say we're survivors too. But yeah, I think that you're onto something with that whole.
But that's why you speak Neanderthal so beautifully,
I
because you
thank you,
have it in you.
thank you.
Because
Well,
that's the
and
other thing, of course, that human beings, Homo sapiens, have that they didn't have, is like this group orientation, indeed. But indeed, it's our symbolic value of each
yep,
other.
yep, yeah. Well, then I like the like realization popped in to me all those years of studying evolution. I believe in evolution. That is a process.
Yeah.
So that was like a oh, well, is evolution the thing, entity, the whatever that's using the machinery of relevance realization, that's using this sacredness, because we just said that the sacredness of like transcending the self, that's a relationship, the sacredness, not the sacred, but the relationship there. Then that's what evolution is always. It's a process. It's not a like this is evolution, this is evolution.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something in that too, where I believe in
Mm-hmm.
evolution means a lot. There's a
Mm-hmm.
lot being said there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not an entity that exists. It's not a thing, but it is a process that I believe in.
But do you believe in it in a sense that you would sacrifice to it?
No, that's the difference, is that it's not sacred. But that does kind of like tear down what I was just trying to explore, because that is something very interesting that he continues to mention about, for instance, Plato. He's like, I'm not saying that I worship Plato, just like I'm not saying that I worship evolution. I don't,
Mm-hmm.
I don't go to the God of evolution and say, thank you for doing these things. It's like it's happening. And
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and so like to make that analogy something a little bit more substantial, I think that my understanding and way of relating with evolution, realizing what evolution does, makes me change certain things. So because I know my body can't handle smoking for my whole life, I'll stop doing that. And that's a conscious decision that I make based on my understanding of my relationship with my evolving, everyday evolving body. And every time I relate with Plato, every time I visit the book of Plato, every time I visit the Bible, every time I pray the Holy Rosary, every time I contemplate the mysteries of the crucifixion, it's it's
It's a different you praying.
yeah,
This it's starting to make sense to me now, and also in the way that it relates to evolution itself as the process that you are in a relationship with. Um, you are different because you read Plato, and then you went out in the world, and you came back and you read Plato again as a different being. Same, you are different because of evolution, and then you come back and make, decisions according to evolution, or see different, relate to evolution differently because so that thing, like that that which that with which you relate as a different being is also that which transforms you into a different being.
yeah, yeah. I'm thinking meta accommodation, meta assimilation, and symbol in between it.
Yes. I told you the answer will
Oh,
come later.
yeah, yeah. And it's funny because now I have it written exactly what you just said. Ideas we confront and engage in while disclosing a world transformed in a coupled fashion with the world. Yeah, we're transformed in a coupled fashion.
Yeah.
And that means that yeah, I'm always a different person visiting those things because the whole world's transformed too.
Mm.
And I'm transformed in that. And yeah, the stream's different and then I'm different. And there's a coupled way in which we're constantly changing. They reconfigure our salience landscape.
Yeah.
And he said, trying to set you in motion. The symbols are trying to set you in motion. Hmm. Okay, but that's him personifying. That's the problem. Like, there's not a clear distinction being made in this episode about, okay, well, the symbol's trying to make me do something, just like, okay, so evolution's trying to do something. The genes are trying to do something. Like, all of these entities that we wouldn't ascribe personified action verbs to, he's doing that. And it's
Mm.
really confusing to me right now.
Yeah.
Symbols and the
So I'm going to jump to what I have written down almost last.
okay.
So John has a phrase that is very much known for. So large that I have to turn the page. It is exactly the thing that I've written down last. The inexhaustible fount of being. To him, that is as close to the sacred, I think, that he would allow. The inexhaustible fount of being. So I think he would say that there is a reality that draws us into itself. Reality draws us into further and further into reality, just as we seek it.
It helps to have an image to put to it. Like, I'm
Do you?
imagining a fountain, like that symbol is really important because then it
Mhm.
helps to
Mhm.
be in relationship with it.
The image that comes to my mind, and it's very personal, but personal to the coven, is Holly's land, the dried up riverbed, because maybe it's just in my life, but this whole series about a meeting crisis, so I don't think it's just in my life. But it feels like the inexhaustible fount of being is dried up in a certain way. And so when I was seeing for that thank you thing that we did with the gentleman that held us, I saw some water, a fountain springing from that riverbed. That's the image I have
Mm.
of the inexhaustible fount of being. And maybe it's symbols that allows the dried up riverbed to flow again.
He talks about mythos containing symbols and a story and always deeply connected to ritual. Ritual is an inactive analogy, it activates the machinery. And so he's saying mythos is very related to religio, which makes sense because if you got a story, who are you going to tell it to? If you don't tell it to anybody, then what is it? It's not like, I don't know. It feels like there's something about relating there.
But it's also you relating to being. It's your story and how you
Mm-hmm.
relate to being. That's your
Mm-hmm.
mythos as well. So religio also to that which is other than human is
Yeah.
also captured in this.
Yeah. I guess when I think about constructing a story, it's not necessarily just to tell a human, but with whatever it is that I'm relating, there's a story that I'm engaged in my relationship to anything external to me, anything other than me. And because, like, otherwise, what's the point of having the story if I'm not relating? And I don't just mean with humans, like if I don't relate with God or if I don't relate with,
And with yourself, I almost want to say it's, but think of, let's remember like what happens when we do ritual the way we do it. And thank you, John. Rebecca's very glad that you point out that it's not neurotic ritual uh, routines. That's not ritual. That's not what you mean with ritual. um when we do ritual, things happen, and then we start making mythos around it because we start trying to interpret what is this happening. And maybe this is the right way around, but it's the other way around. And like in organized religion, it's the other way around. There's the story and then people enact it.
mm-hmm.
Well, when something is emerging new, you have these things happening and you need to interpret it in order to keep religio, to keep relationship with reality, because you need
Yeah.
to interpret reality to feel stable enough to what's going on. And then you start making myths or stories, telling yourself
Yeah.
stories. We did that when we were together. We came up with elaborate stories that we dropped almost immediately because we were like, yeah, we knew, we were just like freaked out and we needed to make some sense of it, so we told ourselves all these awesome stories. But that's that instinctive drive for survival, or almost I want to say for keeping religio going, because religio also, to me, it feels almost like, that's what keeps us alive. That's the religio with bond with life, with being.
Yeah.
So that's also like this whole mythos thing, like it, yeah, that's why it's important, I think, because it just emerges. It's so human.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the super, like the all the DC and Marvel taking over the world. We
Mm-hmm.
need myths.
Story. Yeah. Yeah. There's something that you said about the emerging story and needing to like ritual, like needing to bind to the reality of what's actually happening. And also I'm on Ian McGilchrist a lot because I'm reading The Master and His Emissary. If this fly does not leave me alone, I'm gonna go nuts. Um,
Oh my word! I just had a backflash of our last, previous last coven meeting that we talked about
I
flies,
know
and that was
that's why it's bothering me. Um, with Ian McGilchrist and The Master and His Emissary, he's like, there's no left brain does this, right brain does this, but there is a way in which the left brain engages with the world and the right brain engages with the world. And left, he's kind of making the argument is about the features and looking through the lenses, where the right brain is about the gestalt and the bigger picture. And so it's like when we're in those moments of constructing it, like the story, it's like looking through the lenses only of that character, where we have this ability to zoom out to the gestalt and not just the features. So there's a lot happening, Lizelle. Like the fucking Zoom wants to give me hands, the flies all flying all around. It's like, yeah, that's where I'm at, I think, is that this break that we're going to take is very needed because there's just too much shit right now. And it's like, it's becoming more clear as we continue to have the conversation that there's just too much. The gestalt and features was kind of what I was getting at there, is that the left brain is looking through the lenses and seeing it as that character would see it, but then having that ability to zoom out and see in the bigger picture.
but as long as you're playing, as long as you're, uh, this is a question, though I'm going to say it as a statement. As long as you're in the play, as the play is still developing, as you're still the character, can you zoom out?
I don't think you should.
Mm.
I don't think you should break frame. I don't think you should break the fourth wall. in those moments, because otherwise you're losing the experience and you don't get to really fully utilize the exaptation later. The activation is there, but then you're not using the exaptation. If that's like, that's my opinion, because should is so subjective, you know.
No, I know there's like all kinds of things. Yeah, oh, you shouldn't say should, but yeah, there's a good, meaning there's some things that are better than other things. So should is, I don't think it would be wise, is another way of saying it, but it's the same thing.
Yeah. Okay. Such that we can activate, seriously play, and enhance its capacities for meta accommodation, meta assimilation. He's equals sacredness. That's what I mean, just engaging with the sacredness, or yeah, whatever. Engaging in sacredness. That's kind of what we're saying, is like, why? Why stifle it? Why stop it? If that's something you've been working towards and then all of a sudden it's starting to happen, then why try to let's not actually, I changed my mind. Like, no, engage in the character and play it out and see what happens with it. It changes you.
It does.
And then of course, because relevance realization is interested in itself, it's very important that we're aware of our changing in ourself and self-correcting, self-organizing, as he says. A lot of these things that relevance realization is interested in itself, and it does all these things because of that. I believe he says it's the machinery of meaning making. Mythos is a celebrating of relevance finding itself as interesting. I don't think those are the exact words he said, but he said something about mythos as celebrating. And I thought that's really cool. Like, ritual is the celebration of relevance realization. Let's honor it.
Yeah. I have a sentence before that, I think. Our relationship to religio is one that can only be born symbolically because of the primordial participatory nature of religio. Well, that was a nice sentence.
The metaphysical proposal: what ultimately generates experience of sacredness, something that has an absolute value? It is supernatural, above us, therefore valuable, therefore sacred because of its absolute value. So this was what I said we should put a pin in it earlier. The essence of relevance. They said, but relevance has no essence. So again, I have a paradox of, you said that the sacred has absolute value, but it has no essence. So
Well, no,
how?
that's exactly not what he's saying. He's
Okay.
saying if you say that the essence of sacredness is the sacred, and if you say
Do you mean
that
the
it
essence
has
of
absolute,
relevance is the sacred? Because I just want to make that.
no, he puts it kind of like, the way I understand it, he puts it next to each other first.
Okay.
Like, as the sacred is to sacredness, so relevance is to relevance realization. That's how I see it. And then he says, like, so if we say that the essence of sacredness is the sacred, then all of these other things follow. But it doesn't follow. If you look at relevance realization, relevance next, which is next to it.
Yeah, and you can't make that argument because relevance has no essence and sacred has no essence.
Yeah.
There's only an ongoing process of relevance realization. And therefore, there's only, or we could extrapolate that there is only the ongoing process of sacredness. There is no sacred. Oh, oh, okay. There is nothing other than itself. I'm just going to twist that knife a little bit. There is nothing other than itself that is interesting to relevance realization.
Yeah. Only relevance realization, only itself is intrinsically relevant to relevance realization. quoting John from previous episodes, some people have a mysterious, mystical experience and they come out saying, there is a God. I know that now. Other people go have mystical experience and say, I know now that there is no God. Some people go through years of training, coming out saying, I know now that there is no sacred. Others come through years of training saying, I know now that there is a sacred.
Oof. And in this world that we're creating, what's more adaptable, actually?
People with relationships that are based on the sacred live
Sacredness.
longer. No, the
Okay.
sacred
The sacred. People
lives
with
longer.
relationships that are based on this.
People who believe that someone cares about them, that is mighty and powerful, and they have a community of believers around them, live longer and more
Historically.
optimistically. Well, now it's
Now?
like, yeah, like if you look at stats of how,
Okay.
survival, tricks to
Yeah.
survive, that's one of the
Well,
tricks to survive. Get yourself a religious community.
but now we have AI.
Yeah.
And people are going to start worshiping AI, first of all. Second of all, people are going to be put out of their jobs because of AI. And I'm just like, the relationships that we're like, the relationship we're building is with the computers.
Yeah.
So I wonder, I mean, historically, yes, it's been advantageous to be in a group, in a community, in a like cluster. Is it going to be more advantageous to be in relationship with the AI? I've cut off things with chat, by the way. I just want to say I'm not making an argument for it, but I'm just saying, like, you saw the release of like people have goggles on their face now. They're walking around subways with goggles on their face, augmented reality. They're visiting a continuous space. Like they can leave their living room and go to their bedroom, and it's the same because they've got these fucking goggles on. There's now video editors, I mean, drone pilots, like all of this text to video AI technology that's coming about, we're emphasizing the individual.
Uh-huh.
And
Hmm.
I don't know that that's more like that's like a way to be able to survive better. I don't know that it's adaptable, but I think life is experimenting with these two
Hmm.
modes.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm not sure that the human race will survive that, quite frankly. And then that means it's not very highly adaptable, is it?
We're going to
If we
beat the
don't
shit out
survive
of a
it.
couple of electric cars. Well, that's the question. Does the data survive better in this?
Well, whose survival are we concerned with here? The data or the human race?
That's the question. People are really into information. We live in the age of information.
And maybe the
We're
inexhaustible fount of being is more into information than it is into human beings as well.
certainly that's what we've kind of set up our um, world, our societies to favor. But then you do look back to, I mean, look back to, we look at other cultures that still embody that community. And
Mhm.
I mean, we've just created a world where that's not as lucrative. It's not as advantageous to put self before other, to put community before or self, sorry, to put community before self. When you live in the hustle culture of capitalism.
But isn't that exactly the meaning crisis? We've isolated ourselves.
And we lost the sacredness in that. We also lost the ability for relevance realization because,
We lost religio.
yeah, the results of our relevance realization,
Mm.
which is why it's cool to be Gnostic, right? Because then you're building your mythos as you go and you're constantly
Yeah.
in relationship and reality is inexhaustible again. It's combinatorial explosion. So this process is constantly evolving with like gnosis or with Gnostic tradition.
Mm.
It's like, you know what? I got a story to tell about this, and that's kind of like that's really interesting too. That's more hopeful. I mean, this is really very symbolically rich for me right now. It's much more hopeful to have so many options. I keep saying so many options too. It's much more hopeful to have so many options than to only see one.
Uh,
The text I see through it, the abyss sees back to me. Oof. I think I got like more from this episode than I thought I was going to. And it's like, at this moment, it's like overwhelming because I was kind of making the argument that it's just easier to see through one path. Like if you take chemistry and biology principles together, it's all the same shit. It's all the same stuff over and over again, and you don't get any further. But but like the stories, they won't leave me alone. Like having a lot of options is a lot more hopeful. And I don't know if what's better to have hope or faith, if there's a way to have it all. I think hope brings the joy. And that's something that I like to experience, where faith is an obligation or a commitment, a devotion. And it's not necessarily concerned with whether or not I'm happy about it.
I think we're very much in the same place.
That's comforting, at least. I've got you tethered to me. I mean, I knew there was something bubbling underneath there, but I didn't realize that's what it was. And that's like really what I don't want to suffer through this life. And I don't want to be a chosen one. And I think for a while I thought I had to have any kind of value. And now I don't know what that means. I just know there's options, but I just kind of need to sit in the sadness of, like you said, like that rug pull. I put in a lot of work. Like we've been going on about this since, well, at least months when I started to experiment and consider one path. But it isn't the one that I want to be on. Mm. Well, I'm glad I figured out what was underneath it all. But yeah, I'll probably need a lot of time to process this one.
Mm.
Reality will always transcend your framing. Ah. The
The
flies we
frame. Oh shit. Um, Getting back to the symbolic relevance of the fly. It protects us against becoming zombies, being stuck in dead bodies.
yeah. Mm. I mean, it's like, identity crashing. That's part of it. And that's why I'm like able to sit here and have the full moment right in front of you, because it's humbling.
Mm. It's like I said, it's who you are, it's your worth, it's your right to exist. And if you
Especially in
don't
this
have,
way. Yeah.
yeah,
Where I'm not working and well, I'm just a peaceful person. Yeah.
Mm. Maybe we should stop thinking of it as rock pull moments
Yeah.
and look at it as what it is, frame breaking moments.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean it's not still there. It just means the frame expanded.
Yeah. Yeah.
So finding a way to integrate is maybe what we need to do in this pause.
Yep.
It is not gone. The frame is just bigger.
Yeah. Now we gotta go find him. I'm just kidding. We've already tried that.
What are we trying to find? I don't have that note.
Yeah.
Let's just drink from the inexhaustible fount of being.
Well, do you have anything in the end of your notes? Because I made it to the end of mine. That quote that I read in the last part, the frame's always transcending you. That was my last bit. So
I'm completely lost. So I think we said everything.
So do you have anything for a quote in the end?
I do. Plotinus. I wrote in the front of the book symbol and a page number. I did not read it again before, so I'm gonna be surprised as well.
Okay.
And maybe I hope I didn't read it last time. No, last time I read horror because
Uh-huh.
last time was horror. So, and we, who are we? Are we what approaches and comes to be in time? In fact, before that coming to be came to be, we were in the intelligible world, since we were both other human beings, and some indeed gods, pure souls, and each an intellect united with the whole of substance. Parts of the intelligible neither bounded off nor cut off, but by belonging to the whole. For even now we are not cut off. Actually, the human being with capitals has approached that human being, non-caps, despite his wishing to be another human being, non-caps. And having found us, for we are not outside the true cosmos, he has wrapped himself around us and added himself to that human being who was each of us then. It is as though, in the case of one voice and one utterance, another human being would bring his ear from elsewhere and hear the voice, although it is one voice, even one word, and take it in. Actual hearing would come about by having an activity relating itself to something present. And we have become both, not just one of the two, which we were before, and the other at the same time, which we posited in addition later, when the former human being was inactive and not present in another way.